Okay, fine, I'll take a closer look if you insist. So the NOSFERATU trailer has been publicly released now, which I figured it was going to be this week, but I still wound up going to the theater for it out of, sheer excitement, and also so that I could get that video out. But now that I can actually show the thing, I figured I could dive a little deeper. Not only that, but now we've got a number of new stills that weren't in the trailer, so we've got loads to look at here. It was kind of funny watching this again and seeing how many little details I missed or forgot or remembered differently because I was so excited to actually be seeing it that my brain became a haze of Eggers fanboyitis. One thing that I feel inclined to mention before we get into it is that I know there's a leaked script floating around, and I don't want anyone sharing even a single detail from that in the comments. If you post anything that's a spoiler and hasn't been officially unveiled, your comment will be immediately removed. Don't ruin the movie for people who haven't read the script. I am also going to be a little cautious about showing too many clips because trailer footage gets claimed like PS5 pre-orders in 2020, but let's not waste any time here. Frame 1, we're already being shown exactly what Eggers and cinematographer Jaron Blaschke meant when they set out to make this look like a 19th century romantic artwork with this close-up of Lily Rose Depp praying out her window as she presumably is calling out to Count Orlok as his influence has already taken her over by this point. The nighttime scenes in The Northman were absolutely stunning, and it looks like they're going for a similar pale, dreamy look here with this gray-blue light being cast over her face as she stands in the inky blackness. There are so many shots that straight up look like paintings, and one of the next shots is one of my favorite examples of that, where we see her lying on the ground and being grabbed by someone who doesn't appear in the wide shot, and good God almighty, is this ever beautiful. There was a very specific thing that I was hoping for when I pictured the visual style that they were talking about, and it was shots with like white flowers in dark gardens that would catch the moonlight so beautifully and create some great contrast in the darker parts of the images. Here's that. The way they look to be arching over her as she's trapped in this eerie and uncanny beauty is already evocative of that influence Count Orlok will have over her. Oh yeah, that's how nerdy I'm getting about this one. One of the things that really stood out to me was the scale of this movie. This doesn't have quite as high a budget as The Northman did, but this looks like the largest scale Eggers movie to date. We've seen snippets of communities in his films before, but never anything as dense as the packed city streets we're seeing here with Thomas Hutter, played by Nicholas Hoult, running through this crowd of people. That feeling continues with shots like the first look of the castle that we get off in the distance as this carriage approaches it through the mountains of this snowy night. It all feels very big. I absolutely adore this visual. It's one of the biggest money shots of the whole trailer, and it's just bleeding with that gothic style that Eggers has been toying with his entire career, and we're just seeing it in full force here. That's not the only moment. It's extremely prevalent throughout the whole thing, with another one of the best examples being this absolute heaven-sent, beautifully eerie, hauntingly gothic, and wonderfully perfect shot of the colossal shadow of Count Orlok's hand stretching out over the snowy town. I'm so glad to see Eggers fully leaning into the mysticism here with shots like this, and it does such a good job at bringing to life one of my favorite things about a good Dracula-adjacent story, that being this distant evil looming over a community. Good God, this is so good. Now, in terms of actually getting a look at Count Orlok, there are a couple of shots here that give us an idea of this fascinating take on the character that we've heard so much about. The idea was to make him look like a dead Transylvanian nobleman, and with this being the clearest shot we get of that look, you can definitely see what he means by that. First of all, ew! He looks so gross, and I love it. His skin has this sickly, pallid look to it, and I love how emphasized and harsh his facial features look to be, like his skin is too tight for his head and it's rotting off. The fur coat is a really cool addition that fits the style and season of the movie very well, but I also think it's good to see that Eggers is clearly not just going for this one-to-one remake, but instead he really does have his own vision in mind for this movie and the character. Another hint of that is, this time around, Count Orlok actually has hair. Not just a little bit of stubble on his head or some small tufts, we're talking a whole head of slicked back hair with a hairline that's still better than mine, to be fair. This looks like such a fresh and really creepy take on a character who's been portrayed mostly the same way for 100 years now, so it's really cool to see this sort of redesign present. We do get a few other shots of him, one where he's munching away on someone's neck in what looks to be below deck on what I'm assuming is the ship that transports his coffin, and this looks absolutely vicious, which doesn't surprise me. Eggers' movies are never constantly violent, but he has a way of making those moments when violence comes up hit really hard, and I think that Bill Skarsgård's physical performance is only going to make this feel all more visceral. My favorite shot of him is right towards the end when we see him standing in a room with one of his hounds, and we can only make out his silhouette and the pale blue light spilling in from the window. It's immensely creepy and feels like some shit I'd see in my nightmares as a kid, and what more could I possibly ask for? So yeah, visually this whole thing is absolutely stunning. There are too many shots to go into detail about here, but I want to mention this wonderful scene in a canal, which I really liked, as well as this sprawling field with Thomas riding into town on horseback. In terms of the plot presented here, we don't get a whole lot, which I'm happy about. Really, the only plot points that are present here are the ones that are part of the original story, which I think is a really great approach. You can bet your ass that Eggers is going to have some new twists on things, and while there are hints of occultism being shown here, we don't get too much in the way of information where that's concerned beyond the presence of it. This shot of someone in a room of candles buck-ass naked is interesting, and I'm assuming what we're seeing here is Nock, played by Simon McBurney, attempting to summon Count Orlok. Sexuality has been a part of vampire stories since the beginning, so it's no surprise to see that he's, well, you know. Again, just guessing that's who we're seeing here. I'm not actually sure. I'm just kind of using context clues here. We do see him at one point eating a bird, which is very in line with his character. For those who don't know, the original NOSFERATU was an unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, so the names in the first movie were changed. In the 1979 remake by Werner Herzog, those names were changed back to match the ones from Dracula because the original novel had entered the public domain at that time, but it seems that Eggers is unsurprisingly wanting to do his own thing with these characters because they have new names. Nock was originally Renfield, as I said, but we've got lots more like Thomas Hutter, played by Nicholas Hoult, who was originally Jonathan Harker, his wife Ellen Hutter, played by Lily Rose Depp, who was originally Mina Harker, Frederique Harding, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, who was Arthur Homewood, Anna Harding, played by Emma Corrin, who was Lucy Westenra, Wilhelm Sievers, played by the brilliant Ralph Ineson, who was originally John Seward, and of course, Willem Dafoe as Albin Eberhard von Franz, which is the absolute coolest name I have ever heard, and this is this movie's version of Abraham Van Helsing. We've seen a still of von Franz before, but we get a fair bit more here with him visiting Ellen as she expresses her fears about what's happening to her and asks about if evil comes from within or from beyond. He's described as a crazed vampire hunter, which sounds like it's going to be a perfect role for Dafoe, and I cannot wait to see him play the part. I would also be remiss not to mention the absolutely stellar costume design as well, which is absolutely not a surprise to see because Eggers films have always been very crazy meticulous about the costume design and set design, which, you know, where they're always going for the most period accurate and hyper detailed look they can, and that helps a lot in making the movies feel properly immersive, especially when some of the actors are faces that we're used to seeing in modern films. This kind of thing helps them blend more into the time period very well, and it's something that I've always really appreciated about his work. Everything here looks seamless. I mean, seriously, what more can I say? I was very glad to see that the text cards here are stylized in a very old school way, which brings me right back to watching classic vampire movies while I was growing up, and it just makes me feel all nostalgic and warm. I love the fonts, of course, but it's also the wording of a Robert Eggers picture that is very reminiscent of the kind of verbiage that was used a lot more back then. It just feels like this whole thing is being presented in such a classy way that has a lot of respect for the history of this story, but is also making it very clear that this is going to be a new take on that story, and Eggers is really bringing the heat. To mention those few stills that weren't in the trailer, the two that really stand out to me are this lovely, dreamy shot of Ellen being drawn out of a house, and my favorite of the new stills, which shows this absolute stunner of a painting in the sand with these crosses sticking up. Good God, this is beautiful, man. The whole thing is so pretty. I could go on for way too long about this minute-and-a-half long trailer, which I arguably already have because this is the second video I've made about it, but let me have fun. This is the peak of the mountain, lads and ladies. Christmas Day. Almost exactly 6 months ago, and I don't know if I've made this clear enough already, but I'm over the moon excited for this thing. It looks like everything I wanted, and I hope this can calm some casting concerns that people had because everyone seems to fit in very well. I have a feeling we're in for a serious treat come December. All right, well, yeah, back to Shadow of the Erd treat.